probably the hardest journey that I've ever been on, essentially growing a company with family members. I'm constantly needing people to grow and evolve with me. And so that's just created some different challenges. And then you throw in a family relationship in there, and it's just a whole nother layer of complexity and me working through fears of, if something doesn't work out, with an employee, it's just like, hey, you separate and that's that. Now, if something doesn't work out, well, I'm still going to see you at the barbecue this weekend or at mom's birthday or Thanksgiving. And so, it's actually caused me to do a lot of work on myself, which I greatly appreciate. And so I would say, man, if you're going to do it, put your seatbelt on and hold on for the ride and be willing to get in there because man, if you're not willing to work through it and have tough conversations, resentments can build up really quickly. And that's something that I want to lay my head down at night and know that, I've done what I can to have the relationships be healthy with people I work with, whether they're family or not.
I'm Brandon Reed, and you're listening to Ready, Set, Startup, a podcast that brings you industry-tested perspectives from leaders working in all areas of the startup lifecycle, so you can learn from the wisdom that they've gained over years in their fields of expertise and apply it in your own entrepreneurial journeys. Let's get into it. On today's show, I'm talking with Tiffany Bailey, CEO of Bayside Sod. How many times have we all heard, never go into business with family? It's a word of caution shared by many who have tried and were left burned by something that on its surface feels like it should be a great option, but in practice is incredibly difficult to pull off. In our discussion, Tiffany walks us through how she's managed it, where she's made her missteps, and ultimately what she's learned along the way. She covers everything from the process of her purchasing the business from her dad, to having to fire family members already in the business, to hiring new family members in and aligning them to the bold vision that she was setting for the future of the company. She's navigated these complex dynamics with a humility that unfortunately feels all too rare among founders and entrepreneurs. I genuinely can't say enough good things about Tiffany, the approach she's taken with this company that she's stewarding, and the inspiring way that she's charting a new course for the future towards growth and profitability. Her business? Grass. But there isn't a single founder listening who won't be able to pull several incredibly valuable insights from Tiffany's perspective and unique experience. Speaking of relatability, we start our discussion in a place that many founders can empathize with, as she asks the question, am I even cut out for this? What is an entrepreneur? I have this business, so where do I go from here?
So, for me, it's pretty interesting. I graduated college almost 20 years ago, and I've been in the same business the whole time. But I actually felt kind of awkward about being called an entrepreneur. I didn't identify with that very well, really, until about 5 years ago. I just kind of thought I was working, and yeah, I owned the business, but entrepreneur to
Yeah,
me meant like this, I don't know, pie in the sky, like
totally.
somebody super famous and all of that. Um, but basically, my story is I came out of college and started working in the family business, and it was owned by my father at the time. And that business has been around since 1987. So when I came in after college, it had already been operating for 20 years. Um, and so I came into it and just started learning all the different parts and pieces of the business. I realized that I really wanted to grow the business. And so the business that it is today is so incredibly different than what I first walked into. And now I very much consider myself an entrepreneur because I've taken the business and done a lot of new things and started down a lot of different paths. And I love that. I love having a new idea and doing the work to get it set up and ready for launch. And we've done that in a couple different ways in my company.
Really neat. Were you so I'm so excited for this interview because it's a family business and one that you took over, and so there's a lot of unique things here to dig into. First, were you working in the business at all, like in high school, like before you took it over full time? Were you working in it just as an employee?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, my dad started this when I was really young, just 3 or 4 years old, and so we would have to. It's an agri. It started as an agriculturally based company. So I grew up on farms, and we would have to help out on the weekends and even during the week. And I actually hated the business growing up because we were just forced to work, and I was
Totally.
like, "This is child labor," and it wasn't, and now I totally appreciate it, but I
Yeah.
hated the business growing up because
Uh-huh.
it was hard
Mhm.
and outside and dirty and all
Yep.
those stuff that kids would rather be doing something else.
Yep, yep, that's funny. So when you let's jump, yeah, forward to when you decided or when you took over the company. And again, how many years ago was that now when you took it full time?
Yeah, so I started in it in 2006, and then
Okay.
I took over fully in 2018, and that is,
Okay.
when my dad, I bought him out and he retired, and I've
Okay.
pretty much been running the show solo since 2018.
Okay. I was gonna say, oh, so only a couple years ago, but no, that's like 7 years ago now.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
been a while.
And so when you did that, um, did you do that with a partner? Did anybody stay on that was already on the leadership team, ownership team? Like, are you now, or were you at first co-owning it with anybody? And if or if not, why did you go about it that way?
Yeah, so interesting question, and it's quite a story. And I'll tell you the most important parts of it. But basically, I had a brother at the time who, he wasn't involved in the family business until about 2016. And so he came over, and the company was quite small at that time, maybe about 7 or 8 employees. And, my dad really wanted to have his children take over the business, and that was kind of his dream. And so, even though my brother didn't have too much experience, he essentially sold the business to both my brother and I.
Okay.
Because I had a lot more experience, I had majority ownership. But it was my brother and I, and
Hmm.
now my brother he's not involved in the business anymore, and that's an interesting part of
Mm-hmm.
where I am, but, partners don't always work out,
Yeah.
and being family, that created an extra layer of complexity, but my
And
brother was my business partner at one time, and then also in 2018, a brother-in-law came in the
okay.
picture, and he had a heavy sales background, and
Mm-hmm.
at that time, we were going from a B2B business to also adding B2C.
Hmm.
And he had a lot of that experience. And so we brought him on as an employee with an agreement that if certain milestones were met, we would allow him to buy in
Hmm.
after 2 years. And so that progressed along really well. He's still my partner today. But he met certain key milestones, and yeah, he bought into the business as well.
That's really interesting, and I want to double click on that in particular. That's a pretty interesting setup, one that feels a little multi-layered and complex. Of like, all right, you can come on, you have this experience we need. After a while, if certain milestones are hit, you can buy in. I mean, how'd you even know to structure something like that? How'd you even know that was an option for you guys? That's a creative way to get somebody on and in a more impactful way as milestones are hit and things increase. But like, how'd you even know? How'd you go about that?
Yeah, I'll be honest, like, today I use words like milestones and we
Yeah.
have this plan, but
Yeah.
back then, I mean, I will tell you that there was something, written and signed, but there wasn't lawyers involved. It
Okay. Yep.
was, trust and handshakes.
Something that felt logical and like it
Yeah.
made sense of like, hey, this is a natural progression of how you can get involved in the business.
That's right, and that's
Okay.
right, and fortunately for me, that it ended up working out, and we later got lawyers involved to formalize things and make
Nice.
sure everyone's was protected, but, it was a little bit of wild, wild west days back then,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
you know how a lot of things start, it's your
Yeah.
family and friends and who's around you, and you just start getting after it, and, that's not the way I would go about it today
Sure.
because there's a lot of risk involved there, but,
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
grateful that it worked out the way it did.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, hey, if it works out in the end, you can look back and say, at least you were able to do that I'm sure, way quicker than if you involved attorneys and
Yes,
then
for sure.
contracts and all that
Yes.
process. So, as you were getting started as an entrepreneur, whether you thought of yourself that way early on or not, as you became a business owner and started your entrepreneurial journey, tell me what about it was as you expected and what about it surprised you and was very different than this kind of, like you said, pie in the sky, this idea of like, well, I'm not Steve Jobs, so how am
Right.
I an entrepreneur? What aligned with your expectations and what didn't?
I've always known that, it's important to work really hard, and so that is still true today. Like, I still, very much for me, try to put my full energy into it. But what I really did not realize back then was that I always envisioned myself with, metaphorically, your hands in the dirt. Well, for me, that was actually true
Yeah, right,
in
right.
farming. But I thought that I would definitely need to be the one touching everything and seeing everything and understanding each individual moving part. Just because that's the business that I grew up around, and
Mhm.
that was the example brought up for me. And so that's been quite different. As
Hmm.
we've grown and scaled the company, there's a lot of things that I don't know the details of. And for me, it has to be that way because if I am in every single detail, well, then
Right.
number one, I'm not letting someone else do their job. And number two, I'm not doing my job, which is to progress the company.
Yep. Yep, for sure. That's so good, and I think a lesson that a lot of people who start in their entrepreneurial journeys learn the hard way or learn the long way. And it's really good to understand that early on that there's something that unlocks when you understand you don't have to have your hand in every piece of the business, even though it's so tough because often you build the business successfully because you're able to wear every hat. Like
Yes.
that's how you got, and maybe this wasn't as much of your story, but if you're starting the business from scratch, you're wearing every single hat and you're really getting things up and running. And so to let go of that is tough. And so I think that's a really good point and good you learned that at least relatively early on. Let's talk about as you're going into actual the building of the business. And so you're well the growing of the business, right? Because you're coming in, you bought your dad out, you're now owner or part owner at least of this business. When you're doing that and you are getting your head around this, all right, how do I want to run this my way? You mentioned something earlier. You were transitioning from just B2B to B2C. That's a huge shift, huge move. I want to ask a specific question though. How were you identifying, and let's talk specifically about that shift into B2C. How did you make that shift as a business and identify your customers early on? That's a totally different strategy, totally different market. How did you identify who it was that would be interested in a product like yours, and how'd you go get them?
Yeah, great question. So it was totally different. Like I mentioned, we were a B2B company for 20 years. And
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty risky to go to B2C
Yeah.
because that actually meant that in a way I was competing with some of my customers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, but to answer your question, um, how did I go about getting those customers? One was we had built the brand up for quite some time in that B2B space. And so, um, we actually already were somewhat known in the community, and somewhat known definitely, this is like back in the phone book days where you
Yeah,
couldn't really tell, like, if
sure.
that company was B2B or B2C, so people were just looking up sod
Yeah,
and, and they were just calling us. So, lucky for me, we had some customers kind of already asking, and it got exhausting turning them down. So, we just started saying yes. We invested in some infrastructure to be able to serve the B2C market, which for us was like, a couple delivery trucks and things like that. But so we started saying yes. And then we did what a lot of entrepreneurs do, and we just kind of threw some stuff at the wall and saw what stuck. And some of it was a big failure, like just spending obnoxious amounts of money on landing pages and Google ads that didn't work. But it was trial by error. And, some of it did work, and we just began to leverage more of that. And then I was doing a lot of the sales back then. But again, around that time was when I had brought on somebody with some sales experience. And so then we were able to do some outreach too. And that was a game changer for us.
and so the B2C edition was an addition. You didn't transitioned away from B2B? You just added B2C into the mix?
That's right. So we do
Okay.
both now.
Okay.
So, yeah, B2B still, our widget in my company is a pallet of sod. And so,
Hmm.
we still sell about 60% of our product goes to the B2B space, but it's a significant portion higher than that revenue-wise that goes to the retail side of things just because, the markup in retail is much greater.
Totally. That is quite the shift. I mean, we only have a certain amount of time here, so you breeze right through it. But you were like, yeah, I mean, and our business is just a couple more delivery trucks. But man, I can't imagine the amount of even just mindset shift, let alone procedural shift. Even though the widget is probably technically in a lot of ways the same, to transition the mindset of the business, the structure of the business to like, we're also selling directly to the consumer. I bet there was a lot there. Let's talk about when you first came in again in your building and growing things your way. What were some of those kind of first personnel changes that you knew you needed to make? Because you're in a family business, I'm sure there's a ton that's sensitive here. You share what you want and what you want and what you don't. But what were some things you identified early on of like, okay, here's my vision for this company. In order to do that, here are gaps we have specifically related to headcount and people, and here are the gaps I need to fill.
Yes. So, and I'm so happy to share very openly here because I think that there's
Great.
a lot of people and family businesses and like I
Yep,
really wish that
absolutely.
I had someone telling me that how it really is in this space. And so for me, when I took over, again, we were like 7 or 8 employees. And so, no, I wasn't that one man show, but I absolutely had my hands in everything. Um, and so one of the first things that I delegated was the production. So for us, production is the growing of the product. I liked that part. I was good at that part. But for us, it's a live product, and so you are just in it all the time. You need to put your absolute focus and attention there. And so it was really hard for me to work on the business while I was fully responsible for that. So I made that big hire. That was extremely tough because that is what my dad's pride and joy was. He really identified with us having the highest quality grown product, and that was what we were known for. And so for me to delegate that
Oof.
away was
Yeah.
a huge deal.
Hmm.
And I got a lot of opinions
Yeah,
about it,
I bet
and
you
that
did.
created other challenges to work
Uh-huh.
through.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that was a big one. That was huge, and then another one was the admin side of things.
Yeah.
Um, I've never enjoyed that. I've never been good at that. We were doing so many things by hand. I was mailing out invoices, often late because I didn't have time to do it. And so I hired a first office manager who's someone that's actually still with me today,
Oh, awesome.
and which is really cool because a lot of the people, that they change
Mhm.
over time, and that can be really hard. And the people that you start with are often, not always there with you to
Totally.
progress and get into mature business. But those are two really key moves that I made, and it just allowed me to do more of the working on the business rather than working in the business.
Yeah, a huge thing to identify there. And it's interesting to me that the two things they're so different. One being this production, like literally hands-on. I think it's so interesting when you talk about because I live in the world of technology. It's a lot of the circles I'm in, and so it is not living product. It is in its own way, but it's
Sure.
not. And so it's just so interesting that you're like, no, it takes total focus. If a whole patch of I don't even know if I'm gonna use the right verbiage, but if a whole patch of grass starts dying because of some kind of fungus, like you have to nip that in the bud. You have to be aware
Right
of it.
away.
It's
That's right.
constantly
Yes.
and that's just so interesting to me. But anyways, that being so hands-on is something you were very good at, letting go of that. Admin being another piece, you're like, that's not my gifting. I was ready to get rid of that, and then delegating that. Two very different things that you had to give up, probably equally as important for different reasons to allow you to actually grow the business, and like you say, work on it instead of in it. But very interesting that two very different things. let's talk about how you currently, that back in the phone book days when people were just looking up sod, they're in the S's and they're looking up sod, but now in a way different environment with so much more competition, you Google or enter into some LLM of your choice, sod, you're going to get however many hits in your direct immediate area. How are you differentiating yourself from the other people in your market, from industry incumbents as you continue to grow?
Yeah, for us, what's helped a lot is understanding what we do that's unique. And for us, it's both that we're producing the product and have the service side of things. So we'll
Okay.
also install the product and deliver. So we identify that and we try to market that. First of all, we understand today a lot more of what we're unique and better at,
Hmm.
and we try to use that to leverage. So we produce our product and then we also have the service side of things. So we try to get that message out as much as we can because that does stand out in the market space. There's a lot of service companies and landscaping companies in my world, and then there's farms, but it's pretty rare that you have someone doing both. And so we try to get that word out there. We do what everyone else does, and we make sure that we're present on social media. Reviews is still very, very important to us.
That makes
People give us
sense.
a lot of feedback that they saw our reviews, and I think that they're feeding into the LLMs. They seem to be, at least. And so customer testimonials are huge, and making sure that our website is super clear on what it is that we do and why we're uniquely different, and getting all the chaos out of there. Like,
Totally.
we know that people are only going to spend so much time
Hmm.
looking at our website.
Yeah.
And so we make sure as much as we can that we're nailing it, we're clear, and we're eliminating as much confusion as possible for people that may be looking for something.
Man, if I were to think about if I was going to put myself in your customer's shoes and be a customer, those would be exactly the things I'd be looking for. I'd Google you. I'd see who was well reviewed. I'd see what are people talking about with you. And then I'd go to your site and I would absolutely look elsewhere if something was telling me every X, Y, and Z about every single breed and strand of grass. And like, it's like, listen, I just have a problem. I need my yard sodded. And just tell me that you can do it and show me that others, that you've done a good job for others. And so
Yes.
eliminating all that other confusion makes a ton of sense. As you, again, continue to grow, we're kind of still in that building phase. What are some big bets that you've taken, or even just one big bet that you've taken since you've taken the company over, that you did to grow it? And what gave you the confidence to take that risk? Did it pay off? What did you learn through that process?
I mean, and not to harp on it too much, but the whole going to B2C was a really big risk for us.
Yeah,
And
totally.
that's still, if I had to name one, that's gonna be it. And
Yeah.
to be honest, I did it, just being real out of fear, because
Hmm.
I had watched the company go through the Great Recession, and we were so reliant on one market, and
Hmm.
that market just took a dive for the worst. And, I saw my dad at the time just struggle, and
Yeah.
thank goodness he had some, hay in the barn, so to speak. And so we were able to keep the company afloat. But when I took out a big fat loan to buy the company, I just thought that, hey, I
Yeah.
need to put the destiny a little bit more in my hands than relying completely on the market. And so I knew that if we could begin to touch these retail customers, that would be a totally different way we could diversify the company. And so I saw it as necessary, and we just went all in. And I think certainly we made some mistakes, but we've done a lot of things right. And
Awesome.
I've just always tried to learn from the stuff where we missed, and adjust the best we can. What else can we do?
That's really neat. I bet that was really, oh man, what's the word? I want to say cool, but like I know, like you said, you've got a ton of opinions, a lot of dinner table conversation, I'm sure, around this.
Yes, so many dinner
But
table
it would be interesting. I feel like hopefully, ultimately, it'd be really cool as a dad to see someone come in with fresh eyes. And whether I'm sure at some point, of course, he thought about B2C, but made his different decisions for whatever reason he made those decisions.
Sure.
And have somebody come in and say, I'm coming out with this different perspective, a different worldview, a different life experience, and this is what I believe is the right next step. And to see you take that and go out on that limb, that's really, really neat. Out of curiosity, in this industry, is B2B to B2C typical, or do most people start in the B2C space, which is I would expect, and then kind of graduate to B2B?
No, most people, so you have the production side of things where there's farms and they pretty much stay B2B. And then
Yeah,
you have
okay.
all these service companies where they're just buying product,
Ah, got it.
buying
Yes, and
product.
that's what you're saying your differentiating
Yeah.
point is, that you do
Right.
both. That makes
Right.
total sense. Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
really cool. You own end to end. I mean, yeah, you own the quality of end to end. You grow it, you can vouch for the quality of it, and then you install it.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's really
right.
cool.
And then we're actually even trying to I wanna keep following, the path of the widget, so to speak. And so now we're actually, launching in August or maybe September a division where we take care of it. Not the mowing side of things,
Nice.
but, the spraying and fertilization
Totally.
and making sure that, that's done in the right way. And we have this, environmentally friendly approach that we're taking that we hope to be, a little bit more
Cool.
unique again. And so, yeah, that's an exciting part to be able to take it again and progress the idea a little bit further, which is something I couldn't have even imagined a few years ago.
I bet not. I bet not. That is really cool. And again, putting myself in your customer's shoes, being a customer of your service and product, I could see so much value in that. Of like, okay, you're going to grow it, install it, and then care for it, like all the way through it. And I can maintain that relationship, let alone not have to go to three different companies and deal with three different companies. That's valuable. But just ensuring the quality of it all the way through, establishing that relationship, that's really, really neat. And I could absolutely see how that'd be a differentiator. So that point that you just made of like stepping into that space, that might be the answer to this question. I don't know. But my next question being, what are some pivotal moments kind of throughout the journey in your business ownership of this company has taken it to the next level? We talked about B2C. I know that's definitely one of those. You can talk about more about this, about the caring of the product and how you're going to actively be going through that. Are you already doing it, or is that next, by the way?
It's next. We should I mean,
Okay,
lots have been in the works for the past year, but, we should
cool.
be able to launch it in just a couple months.
Cool. And so that may be the answer to this question, but what are some things you've done that have really, you can just identify as like, man, if you were to look at a graph and see the hockey sticks, what are those moments and some of the things you put in place to get those things happening?
That's a great question, and I'm gonna give probably an unexpected answer, but I believe a lot in reflection, and so I actually think about that a lot because
Hmm.
I always have a tendency to want to be doing more, and I wish we were further than we are.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, very proud of our progress. But when I step back and realize the growth that we've had over not that long of a time, I'm extremely grateful. So I wonder, hey, how the heck did I do that in some way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I really know that I can look back to and literally envision the company making a shift and myself making a shift is when I started to myself have a process of reflecting and
Hmm.
prioritizing and stepping out of the business. It started with me just going to a coffee shop for an hour a week because I had a mentor encourage me to do so. And so I took that space.
Geez, that sounds small, but that's a lot. Stepping away for an hour a week.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
so it was like I was leaving the farm, and, like, that was
Yeah.
like,
Wow.
"You didn't leave the farm, you had to I lived on the farm, and so
Yeah.
there was
Right.
no reason to leave the farm." And so I left the farm, and I would go to a coffee shop, and I would just like, "What's going on?
Hmm.
What's important? What am I gonna do next?" And I recently reread the book Essentialism, which kind of puts great context to what I was doing back then. But basically, I just was having a pause and saying, "What's happening? What do I want to happen? And what do I need to do next to get there?" And so I started that process, and that's really when the business started to move faster and be less painful. And I felt like it became a proactive way of me leading the company versus a reactive way.
That's a really neat way to look at it. Yeah. Wow. I loved what you just ended with. I had another thought that I was going to share too, but I love what you just ended with. I think that is such a key part of what we've talked about, what differentiates your company, Tiffany, but what differentiates you as an entrepreneur and a business leader. We haven't known each other for too long, but the bit that have known you and have gotten to see the way you run your company, that's a huge part of what you bring to the table and what you offer. I do this. This is something I do. I interview founders and talk about how they built their companies, and you don't hear that. You don't hear that people say, you know what I did? I prioritized looking backwards.
Yeah.
Like I prioritized looking and reflecting and understanding how did we do what we do. Entrepreneurship, the startup journey can be so reactive. I mean, there can be years
Yeah.
and years of reactivity, of survival, of just put your head down and make this happen. And people do not prioritize. Like I said, it sounds like a small amount, but stepping away for an hour is a huge deal. That's a big, because it's not just an hour, right? It's the 30 minutes before as you're like winding down. It's
Oh
the
my,
travel to, it's the
yes.
hour there, it's the
Yeah.
travel back, it's the break, and it's the context switching. And instead of going deep in one thing, you're breaking that. And to be able to see that value and say that is still more important
Yes.
than continuing to deal with what's happening today, right now,
Yes.
is huge and really cool, and huge props for that.
It was hard because I would be, leaving to go do that, and I would literally be driving by something that was calling my attention. And today there's like that happens all the time. There's always something calling my attention, and it's not always easy, but it takes real discipline to stick to some type of practice like that, because the bigger the company has grown, the more I can get pulled if I'm not careful. So I always try to remember how that helped in the past and try to stick to it moving forward.
Yeah, and the discipline to put it in place, but also just valuing it. Like you have to believe in the value of it. Like you can put it down in your calendar. You can live to the letter of the law of your like what's in the 1 to 2 p.m. slot. But if you don't believe in the value of it, you're just not going to do it. And so to see the value of it, then when you are doing it, to be able to understand and realize like this is helping. I mean that's huge.
Yeah, and here's just one more thought on that. It's like you do that practice and you walk away with kind of a plan, but you really didn't accomplish anything like super tangible like you do when you're at work. You didn't check a box, you didn't, check off a task. And so like it can feel like in that moment that you really didn't do that much. Um Yet if you can stick with it, it's just it's been huge for me.
Such a good recognition of that, because I think when people do put that in practice, they feel like they're going to come away feeling very productive. And
Yeah.
it's not something that feels immediately productive. Like you
No.
said, you're not, in fact, not only you're not checking the things off your list, when you leave for that amount of time, things are adding up on your list.
Yeah.
Like your list is getting longer.
Yeah, like
And
that.
so it's really tough to value that. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about that a lot, but it's such a good point and something that's not often raised on the show. So I appreciate you doing that.
Of course.
So as you guys continued to grow, was there? You talked about this kind of big old loan that you got right at the beginning, and that was
Mhm.
super scary. But have you needed to go for other rounds of funding? Have you needed to fundraise more? Yes or no on that, and then I can ask a follow up question.
Yes. So,
Yes. Okay.
yes, but not fundraising traditionally. Like I didn't go raise outside capital like just to fund growth, so to speak.
Hmm.
But when I took over the business, my loan on the business was the first piece of debt, and that was actually personal. The
Wow.
company had no debt. And that's just how
Oh, you took personal debt. You took a personal loan.
yeah, I took a
Wow.
personal loan. So I took it out personally, and it was with family.
Okay.
So
Yep.
that helped a lot, and so
Hmm.
I don't want to, make
Sure.
it seem like, "Oh, I got this." No, like, I really truly couldn't have done it without
Hmm. Hmm.
family, and I'm very grateful for that. But the company had no debt, and that's how I
Hmm.
was raised. So
Yeah.
I was raised like, you don't if you don't have the money for it, if you don't have
Yeah.
the cash, you don't buy it.
Hmm.
And that took a lot of
Man,
emotional work to get over that
I bet. I
because
bet.
I knew that I wanted to grow. I had the confidence that we could pay for something if we had the capital up front.
Hmm.
Here's a funny story. I remember the first delivery truck we bought. And we had the cash to do it, but it was like all the cash, like everything.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
there was a banker, and he started coming by for like 2 years because I think this guy. Well, later he explained he could tell that He said he could see something in me that we were gonna grow.
Sure.
He knew that, eventually you need a bank working by your side.
Yep.
So he explained to me that basically you could I don't know what it's called. There's some probably fancy financial term I should know, but I don't, where we paid cash and then the bank essentially bought it back from you and your
Okay.
loan was then with the bank. And so that's what we ended up doing, but that was like a 3-day process. Oh my gosh, those 3 days were like 3 days of hell for me. I literally thought like the business was gonna explode
Yeah,
during
yeah.
those 3 days. And it didn't, and of course,
Uh-huh.
everything was fine, and it was just a 3-year note, but that was really tough because the business
Mhm.
didn't have any debt at that time, and,
Yeah.
now we take on we have a line of credit that we've used from time to time, and we do a lot of equipment financing, um, but yeah, it wasn't always there, and I still have that. I can hear
Oh,
my
I bet.
dad in the background,
Totally.
making sure that I'm not taking too much risk, and,
Mhm.
I appreciate that because
Yeah.
you do have to be careful.
Yeah, and as you balance those things, it's a helpful voice if you are still able to make the riskier decisions that are ultimately good for the business. I mean, risk is good, even debt is good if used
Yes.
correctly, leveraged correctly. And I can just imagine how you probably felt like the whole world was going to explode because that's what you were in so many words told. Like
Yeah.
if you put something on credit, the whole world's going to explode. That's probably what
Yes.
you felt as a 11-year-old, like watching your parents teach you those things. And
100%.
so that
Yeah.
would be really tough to get over.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
for sure. So as okay, I'm super curious about this question because something it's clear to me, even again in the little bit we've known each other, that culture at your company, that the ethos in the building, interrelationally, the people at your company, is very important to you. So as you came on and had your own vision for how to do things, regardless of what all you kept that your dad and the previous leadership team had put in place, sure there were lots of things that you were like, I'm going to do this my way. Here's some things we're going to do things differently.
Mm.
How, as you continue to grow, and you set a very different course for the business to grow more aggressively and pretty quickly. How did you make sure that were going to maintain that culture that you initially had envisioned for the business as you grew the business? How did you ensure that could stay in place?
Yeah, I'll give you just a short background to tee this up, but when my dad was a very command and control, and so
Hmm.
I would say it was a culture of fear.
Okay.
And but you know what that's what worked for him, and his business
Hmm.
was really successful. But I remember thinking, when I am able to do things my way, culture is going to be number one for me. It's going to be
Hmm.
super important. I want to make sure that people are here because they want to be, that they feel comfortable coming to me with their concerns, and we are going to have like the best culture in the world was my plan. And so how I
Hmm.
executed that was wrong, and I learned. And so how
Hmm.
I went about it was I just was always nice to everyone, and I avoided any kind of
Hmm.
conflict, and I let people kind of do what they wanted, and I didn't because I was like,
Everyone's here. Come on, we're all gonna have a good time.
yeah, we're
Like,
all
yeah,
just
yeah.
gonna be in love the whole time and be nice, nice. And so, yeah, the pendulum, I let it swing a little bit
Yeah.
too hard. And so, I had some hard lessons there, and eventually I clarified core values. And I remember
Hmm.
rolling that out to the company. We were like, I don't know, maybe like 12 or 13 people. And they still are our core values today, which
Hmm.
I love. It's quality for your mama, push it, and we care in this house. And we still
I
use
love
those
that.
today. Luckily, I came up with some ones that are decently catchy and a lot,
Yeah,
to
totally.
me, a lot sexier than like integrity.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
Totally.
But anyways, so we came out with core values and, culture to me, I just was having lunch with someone and we were talking about how, you constantly have to be doing these little things that they don't really feel like that much when you're doing them, but they totally add up.
Hmm.
And I think we have an amazing culture now, but I have to work on it. We're
Yeah.
constantly preaching about core values, and now we have this whole VMV, vision, mission, values,
Hmm.
and that's something that we unleashed a year and a half or 2 years ago. And it's just super important to me that people understand the vision for the company and that they're doing something for more than just their paycheck.
Yeah.
And I just again at this lunch I just had, it's a new employee, a key hire that we just made, And I asked her if there was any surprises, good or bad. And she's like, I'm really surprised at the culture. You have people that are just willing to go to bat for you here.
Hmm.
And like that's one of the biggest compliments
Totally.
I think you can ever get as a business owner, because some days, you're putting out this little text message about a core value and you're like, is anyone even listening to
Yeah,
this or
right.
reading it? But yeah, for me it's paid off to prioritize culture.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really, really neat and really cool to hear kind of how you put that in place. And you said that you were like, well, good, luckily that I came up with some things that were pretty catchy. So you developed those. You didn't go hire a big firm to like help you develop your mission and vision and values. You just sat in your room and like busted that out.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, I had read I got a hold of the book Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. And now we actually run EOS, and so my integrator and I have this joke that it doesn't matter what operating system you use or the books that you read, like a lot of those tangible things. They're all kind of somewhat saying the same stuff, right?
Mm.
Like, have core values, use a scorecard,
Hmm.
set a strategic plan, and so that talked about core values, and I was like, "That sounds like something that's a good idea." And
Yeah.
then, I invested in some business coaching, and
Oh,
that's where
cool.
I really clarified the core values.
Nice, awesome. That's really, really neat. I watched one of your intro videos on your website as I was doing some research for this interview, and one of your employees used one of those. Said, "Is it quality for your mama?" Is that what
Yeah,
it is?
quality for your mama. Yes.
Quality for your mama. And he used that, and I mean, there it is. Like he just in a random video, unless it was scripted, which it probably wasn't. Like in a random video, like that came out as he was talking about the company. That's what came out. Like those things are very clearly bred into you guys, and I think that it's hard to do on both sides of the scale. I worked for Disney for 10 years, as you know, and that's something Disney just freaking knocked out of the park.
Yeah.
Like from day one, you were a part of the show, man. Like everything you did, no matter what you did, was very, very important to the broader mission of the company, which was we create happiness. And that was bred into you from day one. And I think
Absolutely.
it's hard to do it at that scale. And
Yeah.
it's very hard also to do it when you're just a group of 8 people, like we're just doing this thing. Like
Yes.
we're all just doing this, man. Like we're all, we all get along. Like, let's just do this. Like, why do we need to formalize it with some kind of like VMV? Like, why
Mhm.
can't we? And I think it's hard to really get it. No, 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 guys, this is important. And to get everybody rallied around that and then to stay consistent with it, talk about a living and breathing thing as we talk about your product, about grass, like living and breathing thing being culture and like having to constantly attend to it, constantly readdress it, constantly bring it back up, even with the people that have been with you for a long time and have that bred into them to constantly reiterate it and reinstate it is important.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about, man, I'm just loving what you're offering. And so I'm not enough in my questions as I should be, but you're just providing such great stuff. I keep digging in.
You're good.
But let's talk about hiring here. Let's talk
Mm.
about, there's this, I love talking this through because there's so many entrepreneurs, founders that listen to this show that are at this exact point of, all right, I'm doing my thing. I'm building this company. I guess I need more help. Like this is a real thing.
Yes.
I got to hire people. I can't do all this myself. And your situation was a bit different. And it wasn't just you. Then you brought more people in, but a very similar question. And like you came in, you had this vision for the company the way you wanted to do it. You wanted to grow. And as you did that, like you've already mentioned a couple of times, there were points where you're like, okay, we need this role then. Like we need this specific person. If we're going to grow, I don't have that gifting. Nobody on this team has it, or we don't have the bandwidth to do it, even if we are good at it. What advice would you have for founders in that specific moment in time where they hit that nexus of like, okay, if we're going to take this business to the place we believe it can go to, it's time to hire. Like it's time to bring on more people. What advice would you have for founders in that moment in time who are maybe anxious, hesitant to take that step?
Yeah, so 2 things come to mind here. One is that you can start small.
Hmm.
I know that I've talked about some big hires, but even today, like, we're 40 something in people. And so
Oh, wow.
we're at that point where, we're still not large enough for, like, let's say, a head of HR, okay?
Sure.
Still not large enough for a full-time CFO. And so we definitely have done some of the fractional type of stuff that's worked out really well. Um, but there are like I hired a VA for the first time about a year ago. And me and my integrator shared him at 10 hours a week. Okay. So like that's it was 5 hours each for us. And that was it's small, and now, like, I could see us needing another VA in a year or 2 because we've just once you start being able to delegate some of those things, you get so much more out of it, and yeah, just to touch on that, like, when you can delegate something, especially when it's something that doesn't give you a lot of energy, like, you're not just saving those 2 hours that it took you. Now you have 2 hours to do something that hopefully you're, good at and enjoy, and the impact of that is way more than those couple hours that you're paying somebody for. So, I just wanted to touch on that about starting small. We still start small in some ways. And then 2, like, I've made some bad hiring decisions. I know every entrepreneur has. And I've learned that to be really clear on what you're exactly hiring for. So I've just made the mistake early on of like I just need someone to help me, right? And I wasn't clear. I didn't outline what success looked like. And that's something that I've learned to do a lot better today. And I'll say that with a caveat, like, you can't get it perfect. And
Mm,
I always now, when I hire, I say, this is what we need, but we are a growing and changing company, and that could shift a little bit over time. And I need for you to be able to roll with me and roll with those punches. And especially in the startup world, like that's most likely going to be the case as your
mhm,
business grows and evolves. Like the roles just shift, and not everyone is okay with that. Some people are just wired to um, know exactly what they're gonna be doing and how they're gonna be
totally.
doing that, but I haven't, especially with big roles, my experience has been that the role tends to shift as the business grows, and
Hmm.
that's been important to get out upfront.
Okay, so you're saying sharing that up front and making sure that they're aware of that and on board with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, and
100%.
how that, down the line then ensures a greater rate of success for
Yes,
bringing people on if they understand that makes total sense.
yes.
I wanna ask this question specifically of you with your business, and, you shared you were willing to go there, so I wanna go there of, I'm sure so many people who know a bit of your story and know you went into family business. You hear not if you hear something 10 times, you hear 9 times, "Don't go into business with family." And
Mhm.
maybe one person has, and they either have good or bad experience with it. If somebody comes up to you and asks a question of like, I don't know, the broadest possible question, what has it been like? Oh man, you went into business family. How'd that go? What do you generally share? Now, me, I wish you'd write a book on this, really. But
Maybe.
before the book, share with us the high level summary of like what's it been like to go into business with family. What are some pretty high level? Quickly touch on some good things, some bad things. Like what's been your experience?
Yeah, it's such a big question, Brandon, but it's a good one, and I want to answer it just as authentically as I can from the heart, because it has been one of the most, I said, probably the hardest journey that I've ever been on, working with, essentially growing a company with family members. I would say if we were just still that 7 or 8 person company, it wouldn't create as much challenges, but I'm constantly needing people to grow and evolve with me, and so that's just created some different challenges, and then you throw in a family relationship in there, and it's just, oh my gosh, a whole 'nother layer of complexity, and me working through fears of, if something doesn't work out, with an employee, it's just like, "Hey, you separate and that's that." Now, if something doesn't work out, well, I'm still gonna see you at the barbecue this weekend or at mom's birthday or Thanksgiving. And so it's actually caused me to do a lot of work on myself, which I greatly appreciate. That's been hard and painful and beautiful at the same time. And I've been in counseling rooms with family members trying to get things to work. And you tend to even make, like, an extra effort because it is your family. Um, I've had different outcomes, So I've had outcomes where it doesn't work and there's a little sting in the relationship. Luckily, we've always been able to come back. And then I've had outcomes with family members that, hey, it does work and there's been hard moments, but now you made it through that and you're actually closer together for it. And so I would say, man, if you're gonna do it, put your seatbelt on and hold on for the ride and be willing to get in there because, man, if you're not willing to work through it and have tough conversations, resentments can build up really quickly. And that's something that I wanna lay my head down at night and know that, I've done what I can to have the relationships be healthy with people I work with, whether they're family or not. One other thing I'll throw in there that's helped me a lot is I remember going to it was the EOS conference, and there was an implementer there who specialized in family businesses.
Hmm.
And she drew these three circles, and it was one was the owners, one was the family, and one was the business. And she talked about just having boundaries with those
Hmm.
different spaces. And so today we operate very much that whether you're an owner or a family member, your job is your job and your key responsibilities are your key responsibilities. And if that's not working, we're going to address it. And there's no special treatment because you're a
Hmm.
family member. That is so easy to say and so
Oh
hard to
man,
do.
yeah, I imagine.
Um,
Yeah,
but we've done it really well the past couple years, and it's paid off and been important because imagine you're a non-family member in a family business and you see that family getting special
totally.
treatment that you
Yeah,
don't get.
yeah.
Who wants to work with that?
Yeah, talk
Nobody.
about, like, dissension among the ranks,
Yeah,
like, what that would cause, yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. So, is that giving you kind of what
It
you're looking
totally does. No, that's really, really good, and
for? Too
honestly
messy.
no, not at all. That was actually really concise for how big of a question I just threw at you, but what I hear there, honestly is, um, uh, geez, in a word, humility, like, you have to be willing to be humble. You talk about, like, "Well, I've done a lot of work on myself," and then I've been in counseling rooms with family. I mean, that's not as normal as that should be, that's not normal. Like, it's not normal to be able to say, "We have to like, we are not gonna resolve this on my own. I don't have the answers to do this the right way. Let's go get help with this." That's a first step that most people can't even get to that point. And so, I bet that in and of itself, having the disposition, the output of which is counseling, and that's really helpful, and there's a lot of tangibly helpful things with that. But the disposition, the first step to say, like, we are not going to figure this out on our own because I don't have the exact right answer. I
That's
don't believe
right.
you do either, but I certainly don't. Is a step of humility that I think is probably core to why you've been able to make it work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's really
think so.
cool.
I appreciate it.
Let's move into a couple closing questions here. I love some of these. They kind of bring out your mindset and how you think about it, and can be really tangibly helpful for other founders and other similar situations that might be thinking through the same thing. So, when you speak with other entrepreneurs, other founders, other business owners, what's a question that you find yourself getting the most as it relates to your journey more broadly or your business specifically? And then the second part to that is, what's a question that they don't ask, but you think they should be asking?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I get a lot of how do you do work-life balance? And then I get a lot of like something related to sales. Like, how do I get more customers? How did you get the customers to grow? That's really common. And then like, the sexy question today is like, what are you doing with AI in your business? I get that. I get that a lot. And so that's all fine, but, if you're an entrepreneur and you're really looking to grow something, I think that there would be more value in questions that are a little layer deeper, like, okay, one being, how do you keep your peace, right? Like, how do you, in the midst of all the things pulling out you, how do you keep your peace? Um, that's something I try to ask people because it's something I'm always trying to grapple with. And another one would just be, how do you decide what's the most important thing to get done? Because there's so much to do. there's so much to do and so many different directions that you could go on in your business. And so, um, yeah, get if you can ask an entrepreneur that, I think there's some gold in there. The sales stuff, man, you can find that on Google. Like you can, I don't know, you can get a lot of those answers on different podcasts and things like that. But yeah, I think there's some other real gold in the next layer of questions, so to speak.
Totally agree. I love that. The next layer, asking the next layer of question is a super critical skill to have, and you can get a ton of value that way. Imagine you woke up at the start of your career, somehow retained all the knowledge and experience that you have now, but you're at the beginning. How do you spend the first week of that fresh start?
I think that I would start out reminding myself that, hey, you don't have to do it all. Like, you don't have to be the one to do everything. That would be important for me because I've just had to like learn that such over and over and over again. So I'd probably like literally maybe like write it on an index card and put it on my speedometer. And I don't care if I don't know how fast I'm driving. Like I just put it there to remind myself. And so I'd remind myself of that, and then I would do what I wish I did a long time ago, that where I told you it started to create a pivotal change in my business. I would schedule reflection time. So I would make sure that that's in my calendar. I would make sure that was doing it in a regular way so that, when you're in there fighting all the battles of your business, I make sure I have that pause and say, what's going on? What's important? What am I going to do next? I would make sure that that was in place.
I love that. Okay, so lastly, what's one tool or quote or book, something that you found indispensable to your progress, either personally or professionally?
Mm. Oh, I can't give you one. I can give you two. How about that?
Give me two.
All right. So for me, I use this planner. It's called the Full Focus Planner.
Yes, I have heard one of the first things I heard about you was this planner.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, my employees call it my Bible.
That's
And
awesome.
there's all different planners that you can use. I believe something powerful happens when pen hits paper, pencil
Mm.
hits paper. And
What's that one called in particular? It's like a specific
yeah, it's called
planner, right?
Full Focus Planner.
Full,
Full
yeah.
Focus Planner. And you can like get into the nitty-gritty and follow that thing like to the T. But when I started making some movement in my business, it was because they have a practice called the Daily Big Three. And you basically just pick three things that, okay, no matter all this crazy stuff that's
Hmm.
going on, you're going to get these three things done. So that created a lot of momentum for me when I started doing that practice. And I still do it today. And there's days where I get one or two of those three things done. I try to get all three, but it's, that's hard. Can do it sometimes and not. But even just like deciding what those three things are going to be, it creates clarity for you. And then another tool that I've used recently in the past couple years that I have found absolutely indispensable is it's like a personality assessment tool. So we use Culture Index. There's different tools you can use. But oh my gosh, people are complex and it takes a lot to fully understand how people operate. And this has been a system that actually puts like data to that. And especially when it comes to people being engaged and getting in the right places in your business and then hiring as well. We just brought in a key hire. And I remember I put out the ad on LinkedIn. And within just, a week, I think we probably had like 50 applicants, 48 applicants right there. And so if I was just looking at their resumes, like it, it was hard to filter through just that. But I incorporated Culture Index in there. I had a couple profiles that I was looking for, and it was able to just create a certain filter to where, these traits are going to be the traits I'm looking for that have a high rate of success on the job. And it gives you data to something that otherwise is very subjective.
I've heard of Culture Index. I haven't looked into it, but I really need to, especially as I begin to make hires and hit that point in my business. I've heard a lot of really good things. That was amazing. Tiffany, thank you so much. There was a lot there that was extremely tangible and practical, which I just love to add on the show. And then some really cool things that usually don't get brought up on the show. And I appreciate you doing
Okay.
that and touching those topics.
Yeah, I
It's
hope
really
so.
great.
I
Yeah.
know like you were talking to a lot of people like startup phase, and that seems like that's your audience. And I hope I can still like provide some value there, even though I didn't start from zero.
No, same. No, it's all transferable. It's all
Yeah,
transferable. Yeah, yeah. And then, I mean, the idea of, I mean, you did though. You started a business your way
for
from
sure.
scratch,
Yeah.
and so you having to, I mean, I really didn't have to pivot my questions really at all.
Okay.
Even though
Good.
you had a very different situation because it's all so transferable. So this was great. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing with my audience. This is really wonderful. If you guys enjoyed the show, leaving a review is the best way to help others find it, second only to sharing it directly with your friends and family. Thanks so much for helping get the word out. Hit me up at brandon@readysetstartuppod.com if you have additional questions about a topic I covered, have suggestions about another area you'd like to see me dig into, or just want to say hi. Please reach out. I'd love to get in touch. Keep imagining, keep creating, keep inspiring your spheres of influence with what you're passionate about. The world may just need that dream that's in your head. See you next time.